Hello everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of our beginner's guide on how to set up a 10 phone farm. Just to recap from last episode, we talked about the products that you would need before you could actually get your phone farm up and running. We talked about a timer, we talked about a power station, a way to put power to the phones themselves. We talked about the cables that you're going to need to attach to the phone to provide the power. The phones themselves, which we're going to go a little more into this time in this video, and then what you're attaching it to. In this case, it happens to be a dry erase board. Once again, do not buy a magnetic dry erase board. It will cause problems when drilling holes through there, and you're going to have to spend a lot of time to try and pull all the sharp metal that's going to spin off when you try and drill through it. Trust me, it's not worth it. For that reason, I'm going to have to go through and then put these little foam pads. I'll cut a little X in them and put them through so that I can push them inside of those holes to make sure that none of that metal will fray our wires themselves. It will save you a lot of time and effort. Just don't get a magnetic one. I can't say that enough. You don't have to use a dry erase board. You can use just some pegboard. That makes it easy to drill holes because they're already started for you. And just make sure that you're not using a metal one. It will save you time. I wanted to talk to you about different ways to mount your phones. And it's all going to depend on the type of phone you have. And there really are 3 or 4 different types of phones. When I say different types, I mean the area that your power plugs into, so where you're going to have your phone located on your board to plug it in. It will take a little bit of pre-planning. If you know what type of phones you're going to work with, it's easy. You just set your cords up to do that. As you can see, this is what I call kind of your standard phone, which is the power plug-in is on the bottom of the phone, and your power button is on the side of the phone. That's the easiest one. They mount straight up and down, no problems with spacing. It makes the board real easy to work with. There are a few other types though. If you see this one here, we have it turned horizontal. Why? Because the power port is on the left-hand side of the phone. So you are going to have to turn it over, but with a little pre-planning, you can do that. As you can see, on all of my boards, I move the end plugs roughly about an inch more towards the edge of the board, which allows for a power port on the left-hand side to be moved over and still have space on the board. Now, is it as nice as you don't have some more space? No, I could have planned it a little better, maybe worked in space for more phones, but at the time I did not know what phones I would be working with, so I made it as kind of a way to mount these without any problems. As you can see, I have 2 that are side mounted. That is exactly where they will go. There is a very few that have a right-hand side power port. I don't have any. I've only seen one. I can't remember the make of the phone, but I did leave the spot on this side that it could mount the same way, just on the opposite end so that you can see the screen. The third type of phone that you need to take an account for when you are really mounting it, and it's not really an issue as far as space, it's just going to be an issue as far as convenience, will be a phone like this one here. Power plug-in is on the bottom, so it's going to sit vertically, but our reset button is on the back of the phone. It will only matter when you come into the part where you mount your Velcro down a little lower and you're able to get your finger behind it. Normally I try and put them in the upper right hand corners so that they sit up a little bit and I can get my hand right behind them, either one of the top upper corners. It just makes it a little simpler. That's what I found works best for me. They really are the 3 types of phones that you're going to be dealing with when you are in this. And the biggest ones is just finding the ones that need to sit horizontal versus vertically. It may make a difference for the type of cords you want to use as well. Now we need to attach the boards. What I like to do is get the big roll of Velcro. It comes with two sides. It has adhesive backing on both ends, and I like to cut them into small strips. The strips then mount directly onto the back of the phone. I use kind of a lot. You really don't need to use quite this much. They do make already little round circles that are pre-cut that you can just use, but I find that if I fill the majority of the back of the phone, it gives me a way to move the phones around if I'm moving them for different reasons onto different boards. If I wanted to pull some phones off there and onto here, a big enough mounting option lets me move the phone around the board where I want it for the most convenience. Next thing we're going to talk about is the cables. As you can see, I already have mine through the holes themselves. Obviously, you're going to need to drill the hole large enough for the end of your cable to go through. But please don't drill it overly large to where you could easily just pull on the back of these and they'll go falling out through. Because if you're going to hang them up, you obviously don't want to have your cables falling out every time you decide to unplug a phone or take a phone off, or if you're not using them right now. Make sure that the holes aren't too large that they won't, you have to push them with a little bit of force to go through, but not enough that, obviously they're going to get stuck in the hole as you're installing them. Just one of them little tips that can save you a bit of a mess if they start to fall out the back of your board if you're doing that, with a different type of board or something like that. We have these long cables. They're obviously going to need to be controlled in some way, and the best way that I find to do that is just buy yourself a big bag of zip ties or cable ties, whatever you want to call them. You can organize those up with no problem after that. So what I'm going to do is, I did not mention, when you're putting the Velcro on your phones, I always try to use the soft side of the Velcro on the phone. Then the ends with the hooks will go onto the board. This stuff does mount very strongly, so it may peel off the first time you try and take the phones off. Just re-stick it back on there. It will be fine. No problem with that. I'm actually going to get some of these phones mounted up onto the board, and then we'll get the board hanging up in its position where it's going to go, and I will talk about some cable management at that point. So hang on there, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, so we're back, and as you can see, I have a few of the phones mounted to the board. This is kind of the setup that you're going to need. Now, I left a few phones off of here because you may not have all your phones when you start doing this. It's okay. You don't need to wait to get 10 phones to start. If you have 5 phones, 6 phones as you see, I have a 7th here that can go up on there. I just need to put the Velcro on the back. Get started, and just remember, leave yourself enough room with each one of these that you can, as you can see, leave enough room for a phone, even if it would be a smaller phone that you don't want to mount quite so low, before you start with your cables. Now, what I talked about with the cable management is cable ties. That's what you're going to need. You can do it with tape. You can just let them hang down the back of it. But if it's going to be an area that your feet are going to be around, just please clean up the cables enough that you're not going to rip the board off the wall, have phones flying everywhere, broken. That's the last thing you want to do, is damage all your equipment before you've had a chance to even pay it off. As you can see, the way I have the cable ties going down the back here into a single group that heads down. I apologize about the light underneath here, but you will see that both power stations are down underneath here. You can see that there is quite a bit of extra cables here. I did have to bulk up. They were 6-foot cables, or actually I believe, yeah, they were 6-foot cables that I used because I wanted to make it portable. I did not know where it was going. Now that I have it mounted correctly, I have the right length cables, so I'm not going to have a whole bunch of cables. But we're going to take a look and see how we route these cables. On this board here, we're going to be routing the 2 far wires in. The 2 straight ones are going to come straight down. That's what I like to use when I'm building my wiring harness for my boards itself. I bring each one separately into the main common one that goes down. Now, you will have a bit of a difference in length of wires due to the amount that come from the sides to the center. If you have a whole lot of wires, or if you're ordering your wires not in a bulk set, you can get different size wires. And that's where a multiple length wires can really help you out, is you can make them take up that slack so you don't have so much. But for this video right here, we're just going to use all the 3-foot wires themselves, and I'll show you how I have them together. I have multiple colors on here, and there's kind of a reason that I set them up the way it did. I started with green, went pink, blue, orange, and silver, and then I went opposite on the other side. That means that the 2 same colors will meet up in the center, and that will, I know, will be my common wire that they're all going to go to, and then it allows me to know what's doubled up on each side. It's an organization thing. You can kind of line up the colors for each one onto each side of your power port if you have a 10-port one like I do, so you can know what is on what side of the board and what is on the other side of the board. If you have solid color ones, it can be very confusing if you ever have to go through and pull that apart to find one that stopped charging or that went bad. Make it easier on yourself. If you can get different color wires, do it, or do a way to mark which wire that it is at different intervals, so when you're trying to peel this thing apart, it makes it a lot easier if you have to. I haven't had any issues with any of my wires so far, so I don't think it's a major thing. It's one of those components that rarely goes bad. So I'm going to start this wiring up and take a look at what they're at now. When I join you back here in just a minute, we'll talk about how we're starting to get it together. Okay, so we started the beginnings of our cable management. Each set of 2 is zip tied together coming directly out of the back of the board. This will hold the wires from pulling any farther behind the board than you want them to. And that is the beginning part of setting up the length of your wires. The next thing I like to do, I'll show you, I already started here, is to equalize the length of the wire. Now obviously you have a difference between the upper part and the lower. If you're using all the same side, you're going to have to make up that difference. And I do it with just doing a couple loops and a quick cable tie to keep them there. It is not tight enough where I can't pull some of this wire. A next thing to note is don't ever really crimp these wires. Don't ever put them to the point where they're pinched or anything. Just some nice loops in it will hold it fine, because as you can see at this point, the orange wire is considerably longer, and if you don't clean this up now, it looks a bit of a mess once you get it down into the charger itself. The 2 middle ones, you're going to do the same thing with. Just remember that you are working with the same color wires themselves, so they will be the only 2 that will match up through there. So if you have to take it apart, you can remember that the one with the loops in it is obviously your lower one on the board. The one that does not is the upper. It is just a way to help you confirm where a problem could be if you have a charging issue. So I'm going to finish up with this, and when I come back to you, we'll be ready to plug them all into the charging station, and we'll take a look at what we're going to do there when we get to it. So we're getting there. We're about halfway done getting everything plugged into our charger. Now, I have it unplugged from the wall. Obviously, the other end is down there. I do it this way so I can get everything lined up and neat. And as you can see, now it's starting to come together into how I'm mounting the actual wiring for the phone. I have one of each one on this side. So essentially, these parts of the board are all on one side, and that harness will be all tied together. Once you clean up all your cable tie ends, it does look a lot neater. We have yet to put this side in, but we will go do it and it will match the other side going. Knowing that if it is on the right side, if you're looking at it, you know it will be on the right side of the board. If the charging is on the left side, it will be on the left side of the board. The blues on the end are your only two that are different, and that is the one that you have to remember what length of wire goes to what phone. Obviously, the double one on the lower phone itself, the one that's doubled up there, onto that one. So it does make it a little bit better. This is kind of an organization thing. It may look a little crazy as you're doing it, but just know that once you have everything together, once you have it all cleaned up, it will look much better. It will be a lot safer as far as you tripping over something. Keeping your wires contained is by far the biggest thing when it comes to phone farming for me. Is I cannot stand all the wires everywhere, and you will be using a lot of them. So just with 10, you probably don't use 10 charging wires in your whole home right now. And now you're going to put 10 wires or more, because we're doubling up with the board on top, right on top of each other. You can imagine how big of a mess that can get, especially once you get into, you have your charging station cables, you will have your timer, depending on what you have there, may have a extension cable on it. There's a lot. There's also other cables running to other devices you might have charging there that you might not want to fit on your board. I will go on that 1 second. There is a reason why I don't mount tablets to the boards. Number one, they take up too much room. And number two, they are considerably heavier. And I'm not willing to have it fall off and hit something or damage something. It's just easier to let that one sit on the desk itself. You can still plug it into your charging station if you would like and let it charge with the timer. I do. It still runs on the same timer as everything else does, but it just does not mount onto the board. Only the phones mount on the board itself, as you can see what we have right now. So I'm going to finish everything up. I'm going to clean it up, and we're going to see the final project as we're getting to a pretty lengthy video about stuff that really is just organization. Keeping neat, keeping organized will save you in the long run. So whereas this may look chaotic at the moment, trust me, it can look a whole lot worse if you don't manage your cables now. Because once you get into it, once you get everything running, you're not going to want to pull everything off to organize the cables. So I'll finish up, I'll get back to you, and we'll end the video there. So there we have it, all cleaned up, everything together. And as you can see, you have a nice group of cables that can stay together. You could actually work on doing a little bit more of tightening up the bundles together, maybe do one more here, and that will keep everything. But for what you need, that's about as clean as you're gonna need it to be. Everything's wired up. Our phones now have a way to be charged. So I'm gonna end this section here. Next video will be posted. We'll be talking about the apps that I'm running on the phones. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the apps I've had currently running on my 10 phones that are up here. We're pretty much done with the new board setup. So everything from now on, we'll be talking about the existing one with the phones I have up there. I'll be talking about the apps I have running, how I have them set up, and then in the final video, I will go through and I will do a 90-day, or I may actually be able to do a 6-month projection of what I earned in the past 90 days and then in the past 6 months, and then the return on investment, how soon that came, and some more money talk when it comes to the phone farming itself. So just a quick overview. You're going to use Velcro. Buy it in the big thing. Buy it in little tabs. They have peel off sticky ends that just go right on. Remember to give yourself space if you have any of those phones that need to be mounted horizontal. If not, you'll have them hanging everywhere, bumping into other phones. As you can see, put a smaller phone in the spots next to them versus some of the larger phones. Ones that have it on the back, you know, you can just run your finger down behind and you can start it up. I have another one up here. I position them here just where they kind of lean a little bit and I can start them up from behind. I normally like to do them on the right-hand side of my board, leaving the left-hand side for horizontal phones if I have any that need to be there. So I thank you all for watching the video. If you're new to phone farming, I hope you find this helpful. If you like what I do on the channel, please feel free to subscribe. There is loads of phone farming content, apps you can use, payment proofs if you're a person that wants to see if the app paid out before you get into this. And as every week I do a weekly wrap-up that I show you exactly what went into the account, whether it was a gift card, whether it was PayPal, where it came from, and also pending transactions as well. I don't go through and break down what I've earned every week. I go through and tell you what I received every week and what is still pending out there, because not all of these apps pay in a timely manner. Some of them you will have to wait a little bit of time. So they're ones we can talk about when we talk about how to set up your phones, and I'll go through a couple of tips and tricks that I found in working with multiple phones. I thank you all, and as always, have a good day.